So how many of you before you came here thought of virtual reality as this black box? Just me? Really? Oh, a few of us? Yay. But I think that what our speakers have really demonstrated quite well is that VR really is this Leatherman, this multifunctional tool with a number of different applications. And somebody that I'm really proud to introduce today, who's really pushing the field of VR and applications forward, is Jay Fraser. Jay Fraser is the global head of virtual reality for training at HP. And what he's really doing is applying virtual reality to these really novel segments. So think of using virtual reality for military training or first responder training. Now, I don't know how much of that he'll go into today, but I know that his talk will dive into some other future directions for VR. So a little bit about his background. I mentioned that he integrates virtual reality and military training. That's because he has a very strong expertise in and experience with the military. So he graduated in 2007 from the United States Naval Academy, and then he served 4 years in the Marine Corps. In 2012, he joined the Infantry Training Battalion, and he served there as an operations officer as well as a company commander. And if that's not enough, he was also simultaneously getting his MBA at UCLA. And in 2015, after completing his MBA, he then joined HP, where, as I mentioned before, he is now the global head for virtual reality for training. So please welcome Jay Fraser, our last speaker.
That's a fantastic intro. I think I need to get my mother on the phone with you so you can tell her what I actually do. Maybe she'll be a little prouder of me. So, folks, thanks for coming. Happy to be here. You're stuck with me for the next 50 minutes. Apologize. I know we're pushing through. We're about 2 hours. So I'll try to make this as entertaining as I possibly can. So, like you heard, Global Head of VR for Training. So what does that actually mean? It's a fantastic job. I essentially look across the commercial training market and identify pain points within the training market and then leverage VR to solve them. And I love doing it. So it's a hell of a job. So from a gender perspective, I'm going to take you on a little journey here. So really 4 big topics. We'll talk about the current state of VR. Then we'll dive into HP's role, what our vision is, what our strategy is, where VR is headed from a technology perspective, and then we'll finish with how folks can get involved in the community. So I will say this is my first time at Colorado State. This place is gorgeous. Go Rams. Big game tomorrow, Boise State, rival in house. I wish it was here. I would have stayed an extra day to go check the game out. So without further ado, let's kind of clear the air a little bit. At such an Institute of Higher Learning, I'm sure a lot of eye rolls will go at, hey, we know this, Jay. You don't need to tell us this. But I think it's important to at least level set for folks in the room that might not know what the difference is between all of these realities. So essentially, in a nutshell, you'll hear really 4 terms thrown out there. You'll hear VR, AR, MR, and then XR. So what does that actually mean? So VR is you are fully immersed in a virtually rendered world, right? You have the headset on, and you're fully immersed. Augmented reality is essentially the natural world is overlaid with digital content. So a good example of this is Pokemon Go. You guys remember that a couple of years ago? That's augmented reality right there in a nutshell. And then mixed reality is essentially you have virtual objects that are actually integrated in the real world. So this would be being able to truly interact with a virtual avatar that is standing right next to me over here. Maybe it's Abraham Lincoln. I'm having a conversation with him. That's the idea of mixed reality. And then XR is basically the umbrella that all 3 of these fall under. Clear as mud, hopefully. So just clear the air a little bit on that one. And then from a headset perspective, everyone focuses on the headsets for sure. So these are the big ones that you'll see across the industry. So for VR, and I'll be frank, you'll get lost trying to identify and research all of the headsets that are out there. There's tons of them, particularly on the AR side of the house. So I'll give you a simple life hack. Just pick HP. That's it. It simplifies your life a little bit. You don't need to do the research. I can promise you that it's a good headset. So for VR, HTC and Oculus. Oculus is Facebook. They bought them a few years ago for a few $1 billion. Those are the 2 ones, unfortunately, that own the market. I say unfortunately because HP obviously wants to be there from an HMD perspective. AR, Google Glass. You probably remember hearing about Google Glass that really kind of fizzled out a couple of years ago. I don't think the timing was there, and it was a little too creepy for folks to put on their head. But that's a popular AR headset. And then when you look at mixed reality, the two big players here are our friends, our cooperation folks in Microsoft with the HoloLens. That's a key mixed reality headset. And then Magic Leap, not sure if anyone has heard about them. They're as secretive as the Coke recipe is. They finally released the product to market a few months back. But ultimately, they're very secretive in what they're doing. And they are the true unicorn in the sense that they had billions of dollars in seed investment and valuation before they ever delivered a product to the market. My point in saying that is there's a huge opportunity here across the ecosystem. So those are the headsets that are out there. Now, the market specifically, it's massive. I'm not sure if it's as massive as Tom Brady's 5th Super Bowl ring, but it's still a relatively huge market that's out there. So you might hear my Boston accent. I am a Patriots fan, I apologize. Hell of a game last night for the Broncos, though. I did root for you guys, and it was a good game. So the market it's expanding, it's large. There's a lot of different estimates that are out there. To Mimi's point, is it real, is it not? We're kind of on the second hype cycle. We believe at HP that it is real, that the hype is real. It isn't a figment of our imagination, just chasing a buck. We really think that it can grow. So, doing simple math here, where we're at now, about $4 billion. That's just commercial. Commercial market expected to grow in the next few years to about $12 billion. So for the Warren Buffetts in the room, that's a pretty healthy return rate. If you bought a stock and in 3 years at 3x, you're doing quite well for yourself. So the market is large and is expanding is the key message here. So why VR now? It's not new. It's been around for a long time. Really the 60s with the Sensorama. In the 60s, many of us in the room, probably not alive. Some of us in the room, our parents probably weren't even alive at that point. So it's nothing new. But why now? Why is it primed for disruption, and why is it coming to the forefront at this point in 2018? Really, it boils down to 3 things, ultimately. One is the performance is increasing, for sure. So you have smaller devices that aren't the size of this room, right? If you think, look at the history of a personal computer. You could track it similarly here, right? Where the personal computer was the size of this room, the first iteration that came, and now it can fit in our pockets, and we have iPhones and Android phones in our pockets. So the performance is increasing, the size is decreasing, you have better mobility, you can take it wherever you need to go for the most part, and then ultimately from a cost perspective, it's realistic in the sense that it can go to mass market. It's not, tens of thousands of dollars for virtual reality. You can get devices for relatively cheap, particularly like an Oculus Go. You can get it for $200. So those are the 3 big factors on why VR now across the industry. So what VR experiences actually demand, and this is where HP really plays a huge role. Ultimately, it needs to be a good experience. Friends don't let other friends experience bad VR, and I'll tell you there is a lot of bad VR that's out there, and there's a stigma still that VR gets you sick. So if I look across this slide here, you have the headset, the PC, the controllers, and then the actual experience itself. So from a headset perspective, this is what everyone gets fixated on because it's over your head. I can't tell you how many times I hear, I got sick in VR 3 years ago. I don't want to put that thing on my head. Well, it's at the point where the technology is there that you're not going to get sick. You hit 90 frames per second, and you're good to go. You're not going to get sick within the headset. So we're there at that point. From a compute perspective, so like any tree that grows, you need strong roots. And with VR, you need a strong PC that actually powers the experience. So obviously, the CPUs, the Intels of the world that are feeding the chips into our systems, they have high-performing CPUs. And then you look at a company like NVIDIA that provides the actual GPUs, the high-performance graphics units that go into our system as well. So you couple those two together within a PC, and you have an engine that enables a really realistic and high-fidelity, rich virtual reality experience. Tracking controllers, it needs to be accurate. I mean, if I'm a football quarterback and I'm throwing a football in VR, I don't want the football to go way over there if I'm looking over here. And if I'm doing maintenance on something with my hands, I need to be able to see where my hands are and the fact that it's actually tracking in my head, because that could result in you getting sick and just a bad experience overall. And then ultimately, an immersive experience. So this comes down to our core product that we love to pitch is our backpack. It's essentially a high-powered PC that you can strap on your back, and it enables that untethered nature. So if you want to do full immersion, think Ready Player One, you can't be sitting at your desk, tethered to an actual workstation. You need something that's mobile so you can move around and be mobile, right? So that's what VR experiences demand. So that's the current state. Now I want to talk through HP vision and strategy overall, and really so folks understand, how HP is attacking this and what our goals are overall. So to set the stage, I like to start with the mothership, which is HP Inc. That is our brand, that is our company, and from a cool factor with HP, I don't know if many folks know this or not, but we essentially invented Silicon Valley. So we founded the company, I shouldn't say we, Bill and Dave, founded the company in 1939 out of their garage in Palo Alto, a couple of Stanford engineers. A lot of engineer DNA within HP, and that really stems from the founders, Bill and Dave. So what were they doing in that garage? They were tinkering, they were experiencing, they were failing, they were trying different things, they were just looking for something to create that could solve a pain point. And ultimately they landed on the first product that we launched in market was a audio oscillator that Disney bought. And now we went from a few audio oscillators in 1939, and now we ship 2 PCs every second across the globe. So a pretty good ramp there across the almost 80-year history of the company. So I say that Bill and Dave pivoted and made new things and adjusted. That's our brand. That's us keep on reinventing new things that the market demands and it needs. From a vision perspective, the company creates technologies to make life better for everyone everywhere. That's our vision. That's very aspirational. And it's more than just companies making money, right? There has to be a better good. You need to give back to your community. I think HP really embraces that quite well. Milton Friedman would probably hate me for making that comment, but companies do not exist just to make a profit. They do exist for a higher purpose, in my personal opinion. And then from a mission perspective, like I said, engineers are in our DNA, and engineering experiences that amaze folks is our core mission statement. So that's HP overall. Now we get into the actual VR team specifically. And building off of what the company vision is, we essentially want to make the world a better place, and our way of doing it is being that one-stop trusted partner for commercial customers that are ultimately designing and creating an experience in VR. So we look at it as making life better through maybe putting a smile on someone's face because they went through a really good VR entertainment experience, or a better trained soldier, or a better trained first responder, or a better cared for patient, whether it's in mental health or it's a young kid that's getting a shot and they're really scared of it. Those are some of the things that we really think VR can have a play, and it's really our vision to make it a reality. Now, from a strategy perspective, there's really 3 core pillars to what HP is focused on, and they're right here. First and foremost, it's creating great hardware. That's what we've been doing for 79 years. It's what we're going to continue to do to create immersive hardware and put sprinkles of magic on it. So think sprinkles of magic would be our backpack. So it's a PC you can put on your back. It sounds simple, but it's not. You can ask the engineers in the room, particularly from HP. That's not a simple product to produce. But ultimately, that's a sprinkle of magic that we'll throw on top. The second part of our strategy is to simplify for our customers adoption of VR. So we do that by essentially our strong ecosystem of partnerships. So a customer doesn't necessarily want to just buy one component from us, then buy another component from a software provider. They ultimately want to buy solutions. And from HP's perspective, last time I checked, we had about 250,000 partners globally, and we will continue to build them out within virtual reality as well. And then the third thing is a key one, is we continue to adapt to change. We continue to learn, invest, innovate, and reinvent ourselves. Our focus right now predominantly is VR, but we understand that AR is also a huge component of the extended reality world, and we're not naive to that fact. So that's our vision, that's our strategy. Now, talking about, this is going into use cases and kind of examples, this will be hopefully pretty cool stuff for you guys. Okay, how do we get there? What do we target from a market perspective? There's 4 segments that we're looking at, and we're laser focused on these segments. So what are they? Here's the 4 right here. So AEC, architecture, engineering, construction. A lot of what Laura had mentioned applies here for sure. So there's a lot of overlap in what we're all talking about, which is fantastic. We're not saying different things, which means we're onto something. And then we get into healthcare. A lot of the examples you provided I actually have in the deck here, or I was going to comment on. Training it expands all verticals. I'm a little biased towards training. That's my passion, that's my role. So I will have a few more slides on training than I do on these other segments, but I will justify the other ones for my colleagues on my team. And then location-based entertainment is the fourth one that we're focused on. So I'll dive into each one of these specifically to talk about the use cases that are out there. So from an AEC product development perspective, product design, it really, I think it enables design thinking in its true fashion, right? Being able to create something, go into VR, experience it, go back to create it, and really that iteration back and forth, that's kind of the core of design thinking. And VR can enable you to do that, where you can pop in and out and understand what you're creating from a 360 perspective and really get into the weeds without having to actually create the core product, right? So think manufacturing a car as an example here with Audi. The second thing is design review. So not only can you do that yourself, but you can also bring people collaboratively into that environment to develop it together, or you can also use it as almost a sales tool where you're bringing the client into the experience and they can see it for themselves. So before you break ground and actually start building things, you can have the client there telling you what they actually want, so it's not a waste of money, it doesn't delay the roadmap to actually deliver the end product. And then architectural design is another big one. The big example I like to use here is a couple of months ago, HP, we built Houston is a huge site of HP, and we built a brand new campus there. And our number 2 guy at HP, we threw him in a VR headset, and we wanted to just show him what the campus looked like. It was kind of create buzz in the number 2 guy, and really to demonstrate what the facility would actually look like. And it quickly transitioned to an actual design review. So he is literally, I think Henry's in the crowd, poor Henry over there, was with the number 2 guy at HP, walking the halls with them, and he's like pointing things out. He's like, no, I don't like that. I don't like that wallpaper. I don't like that flooring. I don't like this structure here. Why don't we go ahead and change this? So it literally illustrated the point, not even intended to, of what VR is meant to do from a design or architectural design perspective. And then the second one that I really think is cool, Unreal. You guys probably, some of you might have heard of Unreal. It's a big gaming engine. Unreal and Unity are the 2 platforms that everyone builds their content off of, essentially. And we have a close partnership with Unreal. And Unreal and HP collaborated to get blueprints of Frank Lloyd Wright, one of his structures that he was never able to build. So we were able to build it in VR, so you have the ability to allow people to experience what one of his buildings would have been had he lived long enough to actually see it through. So really cool stuff within AEC and PD. Okay, next one, the second one is location-based entertainment. So from this perspective, having great experience, it's something that human beings have been doing since the beginning of time. Socially together, playing games, having fun together, really brings folks together. So there's a ton of LBE experiences that are out there. Some of you might have experienced them yourself. You can think at a theme park, having a setup there, at a museum, really tourism. VR can democratize tourism, which I think is fascinating. And then, at malls and airports. So the big example for this one specifically, Dave & Buster's. I'm sure a lot of folks probably are familiar with Dave & Buster's. They have a Jurassic Park virtual reality experience within a lot of the Dave & Buster's. So people don headsets, and then you're on a little motion tracker, and you're going through a really cool Jurassic Park experience. So things like that are popping up all over the place. Void is a big one. Some people might have heard of the company Void. They recreate Star Wars experiences, Ghostbuster experiences, so you can pretend like you are, Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. So it's really cool stuff that's fun and keeps people engaged and happy at the end of the day. So that's LB. Healthcare, Mimi, you'll like this. So there's a lot of things here that overlap to what she said. So just to drill it down, we'll repeat some of it. So the 3 big things, 3 target areas for this is, 1, it's the surgeons themselves, 2, it's the medical students, and then 3, it's really the patients. So if I take those one by one, the actual surgeon, wouldn't it be fantastic that before a surgeon went into a procedure, they were able to visualize the whole thing. They were able to take CAT scans, MRI scans, and really see the procedure that they were about to commence on a patient. So it can definitely help surgeons with prepping for an actual surgery. Whether or not we can train surgeons, I don't know. They probably think that they're really good. They don't need VR training to do it. But really, the prep work, I think, is a big sweet spot at this point for them. From a student perspective, I go back to grade schools when I had like a heart that was like wooden blocks, and you used to be able to pull it apart and like see 4 different parts of the heart. Now you can do it in VR and like literally see the entire heart. You can see how the blood flows, how it pumps. You can break it apart. You can look at it from all different angles. So really cool stuff. So from a human organ perspective, anatomy perspective, medical students can really get into the weeds to understand how it all works together and how it's all interdependent. And then the patient, my favorite one, is for patients. So it can be used for relaxation. So if you have a really scared patient that's about to go through a risky surgery, if they can see it and they can understand it, because ultimately people fear what they don't know. And so if you know a little bit about what's going to happen to you, you might have less fear when you're about to go into that surgery, right? And then from a patient engagement, kind of care and I actually just saw on Facebook last week, some of you might have saw it as well, there was a little kid screaming and crying, he was about to get a shot, and then you see a headset come on him in VR, and it really distracts him, and he's able to get the shot, no problem. So that's what we mean by patient care. The 2 examples that I like to use for this one are one is the Skip Rizzo one that Mimi had referenced, where he applied virtual reality for PTSD. So he enabled the psychologist that was treating the patient to really dial up and dial down the scenario that a soldier went through in combat, right? That's pretty risky stuff, but the way that it was structured was you could dial it up the more that they were willing to experience and relive. Ton of research on that, on improvement to overall PTSD treatment. And then the second one is the opioids. Opioid, big epidemic in the United States. I think last I checked, kills about 60,000 people a year on overdoses. Opioids, what does it stem from? It stems from doctors trying to do the right thing and alleviate pain in their patients, right? But they overprescribe it in some instances because the patient is asking for it. Patient starts to take it over and over again, they get addicted to it, and now they're hooked, right? That's unfortunately how it happens in certain situations. So for some of the patient care, I forget exactly which company we were working with. Periop might have been the one that actually did the study. But essentially, it was able to show that by going through VR for patient care, it was able to reduce the opioid consumption by essentially 30%. So a pretty powerful data point there. So that's healthcare. Now, my baby is training. I love it. It's what I did my entire time in the Marine Corps was just train, train, train. That's all we do in the military is train. So here's a fascinating data point. So global corporations spend $350 billion a year in corporate training. By a show of hands, who went through a really good corporate training exercise recently? Nobody. You did? Yeah? Nathan? Yeah, maybe, so-so. Normally, corporate training sucks. It normally is not very good, right, is the key message here. And there's some reasons for that. Also interesting, $350 billion is higher than 83% of the world's countries' GDP. Put that into perspective. Pretty ridiculous how much money we're spending on it. And does it actually work? So there's some data points for you that I love. So most executives think it's ineffective, their corporate training. Not the majority, but a lot of employees think that they're not trained to do their actual jobs or that it's useless and boring. And why is that? It's because corporate training, scalable training, isn't really effective. And effective training isn't necessarily scalable because it's super expensive to have really good training in your department. So I'm teeing something up here. But ultimately, there's some good data to show that corporate training is not good, and there's a pain point in the market, and in my personal opinion, VR can help solve that. So what does good training require? You've all probably heard of Malcolm Gladwell, I think the 10,000-hour rules, right? That's the idea of doing something for 10,000 hours over and over again, right? There's more to that. So practice absolutely is crucial. But really, Gladwell got his cue from a guy by the name of Anders Ericsson, Florida State University guy, who really studied this. And he did deliberate practice. So the idea of, okay, I just play the piano for 10,000 hours, I'm not going to be great. I really need to deliberately practice. So an example for sports would be, if I'm Tiger Woods, I'm not just going to swing the club for 10,000 hours. I'm going to swing the club in the pouring rain out of a bunker to hit a shot that's 50 yards away. That's a deliberate item that you're trying to focus on, right? So it's not just the 10,000 hours. There's more to that. So the point is you need that deliberate practice to be really effective and for training to actually be good. One of my favorite quotes, oh, I got to cut off a little bit. So it essentially says, I swam around the world for a race that lasted 90 seconds. What does that actually mean? So Roddy Gaines was an Olympic gold medal swimmer for the U.S. a long time ago, but I love the quote. And essentially, what he was getting at was, yeah, my freestyle race was 90 seconds long, but think about how much I practiced to get to that point, right? Over and over and over again, practicing freestyle over and over ad nauseum to really build that muscle memory, build the ability to be proficient in their craft, right? So that's the idea of what good training, in my opinion, really requires. So at this point, there's a gap in the industry because we're not delivering good training to our employees. So there's really, okay, why is VR training on the rise? Is a collision of three forces here. Here's the three pillars. So technology, we kind of already talked about that a little bit. The performance is great, the size is awesome, the money isn't that bad. There's an economic version of VR. So it's at the point where you can see mass adoption of the technology to work. Second thing is workforce demographics. So what do we have going on at a megatrend level? Baby boomers are retiring, right? We have millennials, digital natives, the Generation Z that are going to make up about 75% of the workforce over the next few years. So you have instances where millennials, which I'm a proud member of the millennial community, I will say, in Generation Z, what do they expect? They expect building new skill sets. They expect to be challenged. They expect good training. They don't stay with companies very long. There's not really loyalty to stay with a company like you normally saw years ago. People bounce around all over the place to get different experiences. So the average tenure of an employee is about 1.5 to 2 years. You figure it takes 6 months to get them to a ramp-up point. How much value are you really getting out of that employee? So the point is we need to accelerate the development of folks in their actual craft when they're in their organization, right? So that's the workforce. Then you have employers. What do employers really care about at the end of the day? They care about the bottom line, which is profit. Also doing good, like HP. But profit, where does profit stem from? You need productive workers, right? How do you get more productive workers? You train them better. And then also from a cost perspective, you want to cut costs to have a better bottom line. VR can enable that and without sacrificing the quality of training, right? So that's the forces that I see that are kind of merging together, coupled with the fact that our corporate training isn't very good, and VR has a nice little place to play here to help train the workforce overall. So a question, and it's a great one. Who's actually using it for VR training? Who's actually using VR for training? So there's a ton of them. I could sit up here for probably a couple of days and talk about the different ones that I've seen overall. So this picture here is it's a flywheel. For those that are like business books, there's a great book by Jim Collins called Good to Great. This is the big flywheel concept, right? It's slow at first, really slow moving. You push it, you keep pushing, it gets faster and faster and faster, and then it's up and running, and it's full scale, right? So VR, at this point, VR for training, it's moving, but it's not moving as quick as we would like it to move, right? There's a lot of different companies that are dabbling. There's pilots, there's proof of concepts, there's full deployments that we'll see across the industry. But ultimately, that flywheel, it's only a matter of time before that baby's spinning on all wheels. And I expect it to happen relatively soon. So the biggest one, you might have saw last month, Walmart announced a relatively large deal. It's the largest that I've seen in VR training. They're training all of their employees in the US on some basic stuff, how to clean up a spill on aisle 5, how to manage a produce department, how to manage an onslaught of customers that are angry and want to buy stuff on Black Friday. So Walmart is the biggest use case of all at this point for VR training. 17,000 headsets that are going out across their 5,000 US stores. Pretty good data point. Unfortunately for HP, it was Facebook Oculus that won the deal. But it's still good for the industry. We would have loved to have been the provider, but it's good for the industry overall because it's something that folks can point to and say, hey, look at this, Walmart's doing it. Walmart's one of the world's largest companies. So clearly, they're onto something from a training perspective. There's 16 logos over there. That cuts across many different industry verticals. I won't go through every one. I could if we want to. But the first one, really aerospace. So American Airlines, just to use a few examples. American Airlines does VR training for their flight attendants to get familiarization on the aircraft and ultimately deliver better customer service to the folks that are on board. Energy sector, you look at a company like Siemens, relatively big household name. They use it for maintenance and operation training for some of their gas turbine engines. You look at the military uses it in various form. Pilots are using it to test to see is there an alternative means to train pilots that isn't a large facility. Maybe VR, it can help solve that. Law enforcement for, think, active shooter scenarios, crisis intervention, de-escalating of scenarios. Sports is a great one. Quarterbacks use it. Your very own, your Bronco fans out there. Casey Keenum used VR to train. I got a good data point on that on the next slide, so I'll save that. HP is using it internally, so you have tech companies that are using it. We're using it for training of our service technicians on our large printers. So really maintenance procedure, how to troubleshoot for the customers overall. So my point in this slide is showing that there's a ton of industries that are using it. It's cutting across all of them, really. And the flywheel is getting in motion. It's only a matter of time before that thing is rocking. Now, so does it actually work? This is a fantastic question. And some of that cut off a little bit. So does it actually work? Efficacy. I heard the word efficacy earlier. I love that word. What is the training efficacy of this? And this is a question that I get all the time. It's a question that I actually ask quite a bit to folks because I'm always on the hunt for good research that demonstrates the true efficacy. And what do I mean by that? Or is employee X 20% more proficient because they went through VR training as opposed to the traditional form of training? That's a hard thing to study for, right? To easily show that data. But there are some ones that are out there that really show how it is working. So National Training Laboratory did a study last year in the 3 modes of learning. 1 was VR, 2 was reading, and 3 was actual lecture style. So you can see VR was 75% compared to 10 and 5% on the other modes. Light years beyond where it needs to be. Siemens, 60% reduction in their training time. So from an employer perspective, reducing costs, that reduced a lot of cost. I should have changed this picture to a Denver Broncos uniform, but when Casey Keenum was on the Minnesota Vikings, he actually had the best QBR rating under pressure, in large part thanks to the repetitions that he got within VR. And I think he's not doing so well now because he stopped doing VR. That's maybe why he's not doing that well for your Broncos. But really, it's, if you're Casey Keenum and you're a quarterback and you're in VR and you can see what's coming at you, you can see the pass rush, you can build the different scenarios, you can build your muscle memory, because that's what it comes down to make split-second decisions. You need to be able to draw on your long-term memory instantly to make a quick decision based on your intuition. And your intuition comes from your experience and your practice and your repetition. So that's Casey Keenum. And then the Walmart one, this is what they did for their managers. So they did it as a pilot for their managers in their US stores on Black Friday training, and they saw a 70% increase in test scores across 200 academies. And they used this data point to justify why they wanted to roll it out to all of their employees and not just their managers specifically. So it is working, I will say. Okay, so that's HP Vision, that's our strategy. Now from a future perspective, we'll talk through a little bit about what's on the horizon. So who's seen Ready Player One? Oh, most of us. So I don't even need to talk. We can skip over this section entirely. You know exactly where the industry is headed. Ultimately, the movie was great because it actually saw a nice uptick in VR buzz naturally after this movie came out. So nothing is new to my previous point. Like, this is predicted a long time ago, right? So Ivan Sutherland, there's a book written on it. Now there's a movie, Ready Player One, that's directed by Steven Spielberg. So a lot of this stuff is predicted, and some folks take a kind of a dystopian view of it. We see that a little bit in Ready Player One. But ultimately, there are some factors that we need to focus on to get to that point where we're truly immersed in almost an alternative universe, right? So there's, from an XR perspective, there's really 3 key components that you could spend an entire course, you could spend an entire lifetime really studying this stuff. So I'm not going to go through all 3 of these, We'll focus on immersion specifically because that's the lowest hanging fruit, in my opinion, from a visual perspective. Collaboration is, to Laura's point, like how do we get everyone collaborating together where it's seamless, you feel like you're in the same room, even though you're spread across the world. And then AI and machine learning, artificial intelligence, and really how humans interact with computers overall. So like I said, we'll focus on immersion specifically. And then within immersion, what does that actually constitute? It's really, a bucket of several things. It's really all of our senses, right? So our sight, our hearing, our smell, our taste, our touch, and then the foot, that is an actual sense, but think very play one, being able to walk around. So these are, kind of the key components. We could talk about all of these as well, and it would take a long time. So we'll focus specifically on visual. And when you think about visual, think about the fidelity, the pixels, the eye tracking, where our eyes are actually looking, what the brightness is, what the field of view is. So I want to talk a little bit on the next slide about our acuity and where we're at. From today's perspective, this is where mainstream HMDs are at this point, and then the bottom is where humans are at. And the key takeaway, I will say, is that HMDs are woefully short of where human eye actually is at this point. So from a resolution perspective, human eye is about 25 times higher resolution than most mainstream HMDs at this point. The pixel density, about 5x larger in the human eye. The field of view, so what you're actually looking at, if you're familiar with VR, right now it's about 100 degrees, so not a very large cone. Human eye, in your peripheral vision, you're over 200 degrees. That's a problem when you think about immersion. And then the actual depth of focus, right? So VR, you're at 1 meter to 2 meters, and in the natural eye, you're a lot further than that. So this is a problem that the industry's facing, and there's a lot of smarter people than me working on this to try to figure it out. And there's many headset providers that are thinking about it, and smart engineers that are working on it. And what is the solution? It really comes down to fovea, foveated rendering. Show of hands, does anyone know what that actually is? Yeah? All right. So you guys can see if I'm wrong on my simplistic view of what it actually is. So essentially, your eye is your retina right there, right? So your fovea, which is Latin from pit, you have a pit in your eye that about 50% of the load of your optic nerves is information that's flowing from fovea. So to use a simple example, I'm looking at this gentleman in this nice blue shirt here. My focus is entirely on him. So my fovea is right there, and I have that focus on him. My peripheral at this point isn't very good, right? But I can see him clear as day. So that's the idea of what fovea is. It's the peripheral vision is not a focus. It's more on, okay, what is your eye actually looking at that point? Now this stems over to foveated rendering. So the idea with foveated rendering is you are able to basically reduce the workload of all of the data and all of the bandwidth that's coming into a headset. And when you have that VR headset on, you're essentially, wherever you're looking, you have foveated rendering that enables a clear picture with high fidelity on what you're actually looking at, and your peripherals are a little blurry, right? So the idea is, focus all of the energy on that one specific segment of the HMD in your eye, so you don't have this massive bandwidth of data and information that's flowing. So that's the idea. So for instance, if you were looking at this motorcycle in a VR headset, you could just focus on that one specific aspect, and what your eye is seeing right there on that engine part is really clear, crystal clear, while the other is kind of blurry. But whenever you look around, it goes with you, right? And you get a clear picture of all of the views in HMD. How did I do there, guys? Okay? Yeah? So from a recreating reality perspective, there's a lot of components that go into this. And like I said, there's a lot of really wicked smart people, to harness my Boston accent for a little bit there, that are working on a lot of this stuff. And these are some of the big things that folks are looking at to really make it a truly immersive experience when you're thinking of visual. The only one that I'll talk about here, for the sake of time, is haptics. So haptics is a big component, right? It really, when you're thinking about training, it's crucial to have haptics to make it realistic. So 2 examples. One, if you're a soldier training, and unfortunately people do get shot sometimes. So if you don't feel any pain when you're going through a training exercise, it's just a game at that point, because then you can do whatever you want and you think you're invisible. That's not the reality of what soldiers face. So they need that hard feedback to go from an actual gaming, having fun, to true training exercise. And that's where haptics play a part. And then from a maintenance perspective, if you're turning a wrench on an aircraft, being able to actually feel the wrench in your hand, being able to actually feel the pressure as you're turning screws or as you're lifting the engine out of the body of an aircraft. These are haptic solutions that are out there. They're not great. There are some really good ones that are super expensive, so they need to get their costs down. But ultimately, this is a huge one from an immersion perspective to make it more realistic. And there's a ton of companies that are working on it across the landscape. And then collaboration, we talked about that. A lot of folks trying to find ways to deliver software to the market that enables folks to collaborate across the world. So those are some of the things that are coming up. And then ways that you can get involved. So this was really targeted more at students as opposed to people that are already in the workforce, but I think we'll all glean a little bit from it. So game and XR really is the future. It's going to be across everything that we do in life. I love this slide. I'm not a gamer. I played Tecmo Bowl, regular Nintendo. I don't know if people remember what that is. And Pac-Man. That was my gaming experience when I was a kid. But this is fascinating to me. So League of Legends is obviously a huge game. And they have esports competitions every year. And I was blown away when I saw this, that more people watch the League of Legends championship than watch NBA or MLB finals. That's crazy. So the point here is the market is huge, and it's only getting bigger, because this is 2 years ago. I can only imagine what it's at this point. So being involved in this space from a professional standpoint totally makes sense. There's a lot of job opportunities that are out there within the gaming as well as XR community, right? So what opportunities are out there? There's really, rule of threes. I always like talking about three things here. So the first thing we'll talk about is technology disruption. I mean, it's happening. It's been happening for forever, right? I shouldn't say forever, but for the most recent history. And it's going to impact, how we interact with each other, how we interact with computers. Really, every facet of our life is going to be disrupted when you think about technology. This isn't a bad thing. A lot of folks take a more grim view of this, where it's more of a threat. A lot of historians, a lot of smart people that are looking at it more as a threat. It's kind of a sci-fi nightmare of where this could go. You can have computers that are superhumans, that are smarter than humans, that have a conscience, that can actually do better than us in a lot of things. It can replace a lot of jobs. So there's this fear that technology, and the more we get deeper into artificial intelligence, machine learning, will essentially get no jobs for most people. The non-cognitive, really non-skilled jobs will go out the window, so we'll create this useless class of humans. That's real. A lot of people are looking at that, and they have some valid points. But I see it more as an opportunity for what we can do and how we can make our interaction and how we can make our daily lives better at the end of the day. Kind of circling back to HP's vision and the VR team's vision. It's more, okay, how do we use that technology in a productive fashion with a moral and ethical code to be able to make life better for everyone, everywhere? Technology can do that, right? I mean, over the past however many years, it's pulled billions of people out of poverty. It's pulled billions of people, giving food to people. Just simple things like that we don't think about, that technology has really helped with. So I am optimistic, as we should be, for the opportunities that it presents from a professional standpoint and what we can do to change the world. So engineering and mathematics, obviously a big one. Like I said, HP, our VR team, heavy on the engineering side of the house. I am not an engineer by trade, but we have a lot of software engineers, system engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers that are all working on the VR side of the house to make good products that are out there. And then applied mathematics is also a big opportunity as well. From a software developer and designer perspective, so we partner with a ton of startups that are out there. There's thousands of VR startups. There's also a lot of big traditional OEM companies like HP, Lenovo, or Dell that are working on VR as well. So it all depends on what you want to do. You want to go to a small company and have fun and wear multiple hats and it's madness, but you're loving it, or do you want to go work at a more structured company that has good processes in place? It's really up to you. But I will say from a those smaller ISVs, those smaller independent software vendors that are out there, they always have software developers, and they always have artists, graphic designers that are on staff. So in order to create a good VR experience, good VR content, whether it's for training or for gaming or whatever it may be, you need developers, you need designers. So that's a huge opportunity for folks that are actually studying this and are looking for a job opportunity. I think that is crucial. And then kind of the traditional program management stuff that's out there. There's a lot of stuff going on so aligning all of this, being a system engineer to make sure it's all on track is crucial. So those are some of the big opportunities that we're seeing across the landscape overall. So I will end, being a military guy, I'll end with the fifth law of the Navy. So I love this one. On the strength of one link in the cable, dependent the might of the chain. So ultimately, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of companies that are playing in this. And really to make this a reality, to strive closer to Ready Player One, everyone needs to be in sync and ultimately working together. Because if you have bad hardware, but good content, the content's not going to be a good experience, right? So you need everyone to be kind of working in conjunction together to make it a reality at the end of the day. And that includes academia, industry working together, as well as within the industry across the total value chain that we see out there. There's actually a quote, and I can't remember it, but I literally went to the bathroom right before, and there's a quote from Lori on the wall there leading into the bathroom. There's something about collaboration is the key to doing good work. So the guy that literally created this, or that it's named after the center that we sit in, had a very similar quote, and I thought it was fortuitous that I saw that as I was going to the bathroom literally a half hour before giving this presentation. So, so that's it on my end. So thanks for the attentiveness. In sum, VR it's prime for disruption. It's on the cusp. HP is playing a big role in it, and we truly believe that it can make a better life for everyone in many different realms of entertainment, of democratizing training, democratizing tourism, democratizing a lot of different things. And we think VR can make that happen. So thanks for the time. Appreciate it.